Hey guys, Thomas Jr. here, aka Mustached. I'm here to review the movie The Prodigy. So, before I begin this review, uh, as I mentioned in the previous review, I had notes on this movie, but for some reason my emails decided to delete themselves, and that is how I send myself my notes. And they have been deleted. So once again, I will inform you if you have an email any of the important emails, make sure to back them up, guys. It's very important. You don't want your important emails to be suddenly erased from you from existence and have no clue as to why that happened. Anyways, with that little disclaimer out of the way, the only other thing I will say is that the trailer for this movie did look good, but then I saw the movie, so get ready for this type of review slash rant, unfortunately. So let's look at and review, without notes, the movie The Prodigy. So we begin this movie following this killer guy, and we had seen him kill his latest victim, or at least attempt to. Apparently, this lady gets away, has her arm cut off, but again is able to escape. Meanwhile, as this is simultaneously happening, a new baby is being born. We are following these two very different stories, hand by hand, moment by moment. It's flashing back and forth between the two, and just as this killer guy dies, the new baby is born. And already based on that premise alone, I already have so many issues with this movie, but I'm actually going to save that rant for a little bit later on in the movie review without any notes. So we cut to this baby growing up, and the mother named Sarah and her husband named John, trying to take care of and essentially help this baby boy grow. And he appears to be growing at an accelerated rate. We are seeing him learn and speak words years in advance, or months in advance, or however long it usually takes. And by the age of 8, which is the age we primarily stick to, we see that he is already now in this, this specialized school, but with the rest of the students. So now that we have that out of the way, we can already guess where this is going. Things certainly take a shift in the bad direction as he eventually comes to a consensus that he wants to ask this person out, ask this person to be a teammate, but this other kid already was the partner, I suppose. So he goes out, gets a wrench, somehow is able to walk in the room with the wrench and having nobody say anything, by the way, which I already find beyond baffling. It's like the teacher didn't notice this, didn't notice the huge ass wrench in his hand, didn't say, hey, you have a wrench in your hand and you're walking, and he raises up the wrench and he holds it there even for a few seconds, implying that there was a time that there could have even been more of people saying, hey, why are you raising a wrench like that? Why do you look like you're about to attack this kid? Etc., etc. None of that happens, by the way. He hits the kid down. This cuts to the parents being called in and him saying or proclaiming that he doesn't remember exactly what happened. So the mother, being as worried as she is, eventually calls this psychologist named Arthur, this older gentleman that essentially wants to see what is going on. So he starts to ask a few questions in this little interview-like session, and afterwards he describes to the mother and this other lady, I guess a teacher, a fellow teacher or whatever, that essentially that the belief that he is falling under is that Um, the son Miles, that is his name, it says it right there on the poster, that essentially there's this thing, this belief system in the East called, oh boy, it is called, uh, not rebirth, but like, reincarnation, that's the word. Oh, jeez. Sorry about that. I don't know why I was like having a moment there where I didn't know, but anyway. They are essentially saying that somebody was reincarnated into the son of Miles, sort of semi-possessing him via that. Okay, so now that we have that premise of that, essentially, here's where I start to go, okay, I already know what two movies I can already think of that this movie clearly follows. First is Chucky. We have a killer who, is on the loose. He ends up in this toy store with this little book that he has, and he starts to read it, and he starts to possess a doll. Uh, in other words, he did something, even though it was, through a MacGuffin. There was something from him to get from point A to point B. Even if that was a MacGuffin, it's still better than, oh, you just reincarnated into this boy for the reasons of you were deathed at the same time of his birth. That makes no sense. At least I can buy into the whole, like, MacGuffin thing a little bit more, as, crazy and as, nonsensical that is on its own. I still prefer there to be some sort of, like, there is something that makes it so that the transference can happen, I suppose, instead of it just happening because reasons that, again, it doesn't feel like there's any connection besides time, which, again, I don't know, it doesn't feel as well put together. The other movie I immediately think of when I see this kid killing people, but it's not really a kid, is The Orphan. And in that, it actually never was a young girl. It was someone who had a disease that, or a sickness, or whatever you want to refer to it as, where the body looks like it's young and it stays that way for a much lengthier time. And, it made, in that case, that's even more realistic because that is based off of something that actually exists in real life. To an extent, of course, she does add on a little bit of makeup to help on her little persona of being a child. Nonetheless, that again, there's something there that is like attachable, something that in The Orphan that is very, even more so, maybe even a little bit more relatable to some people if they are dealing with something similar. But no, this kid is just possessed by some guy who died, a killer to be exact, so now he is killing himself or injuring. In fact, later on in the movie, he ends up killing the dog, and then later on, he exposes it to both the parent, or at least the mother, and then she kind of shares that information with John, the husband, who gets really upset, obviously. So they are growing more and more concerned as they are seeing these things transpire. At first, she doesn't believe in this whole reincarnation thing, but as more and more events happen, more like her seeing the son and then seeing the face of the killer very briefly for whatever reason, things of that nature, having nightmares about this guy too. after all of these, she eventually caves in, contacts Arthur again, and says, "Okay, whatever, you do your thing. Uh, I'll let you do your thing." And so he does, trying to hypnotize the kid into essentially going into the state of being the killer. And the killer says that somehow, when he was within the room of this Arthur guy, he went to the restroom, I guess at some point off screen, by the way, placed pubic hair in his mouth so that he could call the police, behave like a child, and say that this man was a pedophile, essentially. That is the thing that he, uses against this doctor, or I should say psychologist again. So, of course, Arthur backs up because, of course, a man would do that after being accused of such a obvious big crime, probably ultimate crime of like, yeah, your career is over kind of crime. So, despite that, after their little session of trying to help is over, he ends up at night calling Sarah, saying that he noticed that the etchings on the chair reveal that he did in fact write the name of the killer's name. So Sarah looks this up. She leaves her laptop on, by the way, which doesn't really go anywhere, but it's still a very stupid decision regardless. So she goes to try to look for him, and she eventually plans with John at night, we gotta take this, we gotta take him to this place. I think they were referring to some sort of, like, prison or something. I don't know. It was some sort of location that was way further away. So we cut to John trying to pick up Miles from school, and then, like, Miles playing hesitantly, and eventually does kind of join him in the car. Miles ends up stabbing the father in the back, which causes them to crash. Meanwhile, the mother is like, "Oh no!" Oh, well, she doesn't. Like, she's like digging up more info or whatever. Finds out like who essentially the killer was after. Grabs a whole bunch of stuff, and then she's like, "Alright, Miles, we're gonna go out and drink this pill or whatever." So he does. So they drive off for a long time, X amount of time, to another state where this random woman that the killer had almost killed at the beginning. So she goes over there, that being Sarah, with the gun in hand, ready to kill this woman so that the son can be released from the killer. But there is this whole thing earlier on in the movie with Arthur having explained that essentially if they don't do this thing fast enough, that the older killer would essentially take over. And apparently later on in the movie we learn that the killer had already taken full control over Miles ever since he made her promise to look after him, apparently. This happens on one of the nights. I forget exactly which night it is, but it's somewhere in the middle-ish, closer to the end point of the movie. Anyways, getting back to where we were. So, essentially, she goes trying to kill this woman. She learns more about her. This mother ends up being talking to another mother who is the author of this book. So it becomes harder and harder for Sarah to accept the fact that she's about to do this. So she ends up going in the bathroom, getting her gun ready, getting ready to shoot, essentially. But she does back down in the in this opening. But she, the author lady, sees that Miles had already made his way inside with knife in hand. He repeats this motion that the author recognizes as what the killer did, and he proceeds to run up and stab her while the mother, Sarah, watches on the floor doing absolutely nothing else, by the way. She doesn't try to pull him off or, like, stop him. So Miles proceeds to kill this woman, doesn't take off her hand, so I assume that's why the killer remained in control, because he technically didn't do his full thing, I guess. Although he already proclaimed he was already in control, so he ends up walking away. Sarah ends up following him outside to this field, and again, he tells her exactly what I said earlier about fully taking over. So she has the gun, points it up at him. He's just standing there doing his thing, humming or whatever. She gets ready to shoot. We hear the gun bang, but we learn from out of nowhere, literally out of nowhere, out of complete right field in this case, I think, this old man, who we have never seen any other part of the film, randomly shows up, sees this, and of course we see it from his perspective, so we're seeing what looks to be a woman holding up a gun to a child, and he proceeds to shoot the woman, that being Sarah, of course. So, Miles hams it up, or the killer hams it up as Miles, I should say, I suppose, running into this old man's leg, hugging it, crying and all that stuff. He essentially gets to go back to the woman teacher or whatever, and then they're like, oh, welcome back, and welcome to your new life, house, place, or whatever. They refer to the husband saying that he was still in the hospital. We see a brief scene where the two of them, that being Sarah and him, were in the hospital earlier in the movie. That he was recuperating still, and that Miles would get to return to school or whatever. And we cut to Miles looking at his room, looking in the mirror, but he sees the killer as he would have normally appeared, and of course him still humming that song. And that was The Prodigy. I feel like this movie, again, it kind of fails at its premise through its execution. Again, I just don't feel like it's equally as adequate to essentially take away this kid's life because some guy killer died at the same time. Again, I just feel like that's kind of an unfair way to go about doing something like this. Again, I call back to, movies like The Orphan, where I feel like they do it right, or even, again, the original Child's Play, even if that's done via a MacGuffin. And even as a killer, if we were to take that route, I don't think that he even reaches his maximum potential. I think, like, the worst thing he does is kill the dog, which, again, is bad, but, again, it's like, he couldn't get anything else in there. I keep going back to The Orphan, because this is, like, the closest movie I can compare it to as far as, like, the way, that, but anyway, we see her, I feel, do a lot more damage, be a lot more ruthless, and the movie even ends in a very similar fashion, except that it revolves around the police, which I already feel like makes more sense. And in fact, I actually think that, ironically, if this movie had ended the same with the cops, I think that actually would have made a bit more sense for this movie. I think it would have gone full circle. We see the police arrive to kill the killer, originally at the beginning of the film. It would probably make a lot of sense to have the same group of police there arrive at the scene after, getting a call about, someone dying or whatever, but then seeing this woman hold up a gun to a child and end up shooting her. again, that already feels like it makes a lot more sense in terms of like making it go full circle. See, I can think of better endings to this movie than this movie. So there you go. Um Again, I don't think like this movie reaches its maximum potential either. Um it just feels like this movie takes more from other movies without pushing the envelope in any direction. In that case, a lot of these other elements don't feel like they work as strongly or anything of that nature. But that being said, I think that is my review of the Prodigy. Oh my god, words. I would give it a 3 out of 10. Not a very good movie. And yeah, that's my review of The Prodigy. And if you enjoyed it, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out that link in the description. The first will head you over to my Discord channel. The second will head you over to my Patreon page. Any donations are greatly appreciated and more than desperate at this point. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye.